Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday webinar series, Chiropractic Economics Webinar for Doctors of Chiropractic. I'm Daniel Sosnowski, Editor-in-Chief of Chiropractic Economics. Today's webinar, Excess Fat, the Effects on Patient Health and Scientific Breakthroughs on How to Resolve This Epidemic, is sponsored by Urconia. And, as always, our program is being recorded and will be archived at Chiropractic Economics website, chiroeco.com/webinar for 1 year. Our expert is on board here today to speak with you, and when his presentation is complete, we will follow with a question and answer period. You can submit questions throughout the presentation by clicking on the appropriate icon on the taskbar at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our very best to get to all of your questions, but if we run out of time, we'll forward the remaining questions to our expert and notify you via email when the answers are posted on our website, chiroeco.com/webinar. Our presenter today is Robert Silverman, DC, a diplomate with the American Clinical Board of Nutrition and the Chiropractic Board of Clinical Nutrition, who is here to help you understand how to address patients with excess adipose tissue and inflammation using the latest and cutting-edge technology. Dr. Silverman, thank you for taking the time to participate in our webinar and for sharing your expertise with clinical nutrition and laser therapy and helping our audience understand how they can apply current research to treating patients suffering from obesity. Before we get started, Dr. Silverman, please give us a brief background on yourself and your work with clinical nutrition.
Sure. Thank you so much, Daniel. I really appreciate being here. A very quick background. I have a doctorate in chiropractic from the University of Bridgeport in 1999. I acquired a master's in human nutrition. I have dual diplomates with the ACVN and the CBCN, certified nutrition specialist. I am a certified sports nutritionist, and I'm also a certified clinical nutritionist. I've been fortunate enough to have published over 150 articles, many of which have been in chiroeconomics. And I have an Amazon #1 best-selling book called Inside Out Health, A Revolutionary Approach to Your Body, which once again, Chiropractic Economics was nice enough to do a review.
All right, well, very good. And yes, we do publish you frequently, and we appreciate your articles quite a bit. Now, if you're ready, Dr. Silverman, please begin your presentation.
Thank you once again. So I always like to start everything off with a quote, and I think this is excellent. I'm a big proponent that chiropractic is always pointed at fixing the body from the inside out and looking at a systems approach and not a symptom approach. With that being said, I believe a healthy outside starts from the inside. So let's go over a few objectives that I'd like to cover today. Number one, I'd like to identify how excess fat can cause pain and inflammation. I'd also like to discuss the breakdown of the science of low-level laser for non-invasive fat loss. In addition, I'd like to summarize statistical analysis of the growing healthcare issue associated with excess fat. And I'd also like to add some ideas on new breakthrough technologies on the effect on excess fat versus traditional methods, truly connecting new laser research with practical applications. So what's the problem? What's our current problem in America? There's vast problems. Problem number one is the average American consumes 160 pounds of sugar per year, 34 teaspoons per day for the average child. Sugar consumption is up so high and it is so strong in its addictive powers that if it were offered to a rat or a mouse, 94% of rats or mice would want to consume sugar versus cocaine. Sugar is a toxin. Our biggest problem is that we are, without question, playing with sugar, which is truly a drug. And it's a drug because it goes to the reward center of the brain, the same reward center that nicotine, alcohol, cocaine, and the like really find pleasurable. In addition, our wheat consumption is 146 pounds per year. The wheat issue, gluten means glue in Latin, is a vast issue here in America. Our wheat is contaminated. Jack LaLanne once said, if man makes it, I won't eat it. Our wheat is also sprayed with Roundup, which has a specific ingredient called glyphosate. Glyphosate has been called by the World Health Organization a cancer-causing drug. It's been considered carcinogenous. In addition, gluten also has an adverse effect to the body in that it stimulates what we call leaky gut. The gut is 70% of our immune cells in our body. With our gut being compromised, we have higher incidence of obesity. Caloric sweeteners, 142 pounds per year. Our lovely caloric sweeteners pose a major issue because caloric sweeteners lead us down a road of a higher incidence of diabetes than actually soda or sugar-filled soda. They also lead us down an incidence of leaky gut, damaging our gut, leading to obesity. Non-steroid anti-inflammatories, which are Aleve, Advil, and ibuprofen, they were just in the news. Ibuprofen increased our incidence of heart attack by 31%, and NSAIDs in general increased our incidence of heart attack by 50%. We live in a country that's full and desiring medications and not looking at healthy alternatives for long-lasting quality life and preventive medicine. Toxins. One of the chapters in my books is called Toxins. We live in a toxic state. We have to understand that we have to get these toxins out. Toxins are housed in your fat cells. So if I will, fat cells are depositories for toxins. And finally, stress. Well, not necessarily just the typical stress of worried about if the rent is due, all sorts of physical and mental stresses. Some quick obesity facts. Worldwide, there was almost 1 billion people in 1980 that was obese. We're over 2 billion in 2013. It's 145% growth. 26% of children now are obese, which is a growing problem, and millions of people die every year from obesity. I quickly would like to go through 12 graphs that show why people are just getting fat. Well, if you really look at the woman right there, you see what we call the standard American diet, SAD. What an acronym. We are 33rd, America that is, in health, yet we consider ourselves one of the most, if not the most developed countries, yet we lag. And look what they're eating: white flour, fried foods, sodas in plastics, etc. So number one thing that we've seen in America is people are eating more junk food than ever before. Sugar, as I alluded to earlier, consumption has skyrocketed up to that 160%, 160 pounds for the average American. In addition, the most consumed calorie or caloric intake comes from high fructose corn syrup. Unfortunately for us, high fructose corn syrup now can be labeled as fructose, which is the fruit sugar, as of 2014 with a change in the food labeling. We are consuming too much sugar, added sugar, sugar alcohols, and high fructose corn syrup. People also seem to gain a lot of weight during the holidays, and they gain their usual 10, but they're not taking their weight off because their New Year's resolutions are not working. So I always tell everybody, try not to overeat at the holiday season. The obesity epidemic truly started when the low-fat guidelines were published. In 1971, the U.S. government decided to help everybody and tried to decrease the incidence of cardiac arrest, heart attacks. The government came up and they said, well, these cardiologists said, let's not consume fat, let's consume carbohydrates. That statement was based on a 1965 study that Harvard University gave out, where the 3 researchers were literally paid off from the sugar company. So we were told to eat carbohydrates and not eat fat, and we now know that that's incorrect. Ever since the increase of carbohydrates, weight gain has ensued, diabetes has ensued. Fat is not a foe, fat is a friend. Food is cheaper than ever before, man. You can get that Mickey D's just so cheap. You can get KFC and things like that. People are drinking more sugary sodas and fruit juices. They are without question on the rise. Soda's not a good option, and obviously fruit juice doesn't have any of the nutritional value. It just has, if you will, empty calories. We've got so many varieties in foods that I've never seen anybody put food away or order a small portion. You go overseas, you go to Europe, they may eat some of the similar food, but the portion size, we have what we call in America portion distortion. And people now are very sedentary. 30% of our time is spent in a seated position. 0.69% of our time is spent we're exercising or moving. With that being said, we're just not burning calories at work. And unfortunately, people are eating more vegetable oils, mostly from processed foods now, as opposed to good quality oils like a canola oil, olive oil, and the like. The social environment can strongly affect caloric intake. I converse with a lot of my patients on an intake form, and I ask them, do they drink? And they go socially. And my answer or my question to them is, how social are you? People are sleeping less since the advent of the light bulb, where the average American sleep 10.5 hours. The average American is now getting 6.5 hours. And of course, we're just eating more and more calories. People are just, I think the average American is consuming 562 more calories than their counterpart 50 years ago. What's fascinating is no nation has lowered their obesity rate in 33 years, and all other countries are following suit. We're the leader in that. The Lancet discussed that and looked at 3 decades of data from 188 countries. Global diabetes rates are rising as obesity spreads. In America alone, we are at over 50%. That's technically 52.3% of people have diabetes or pre-diabetes. 14.3% of Americans have the diabetes, 38% have the pre-diabetes. That's not including pre-diabetes, which is insulin resistance. By 2030, 50% of Americans will have either diabetes type 1, type 2, or type 3. Women are the biggest culprits, believe it or not, in the obesity. 4 out of 10 American women are now classified as obese, whereas it's only 15% of women worldwide. When you look at the gender counterpart, men, 35% of men are obese and only 11% of men are worldwide. This obesity triggers diabetes and can lead to heart disease. But it's truly deeper than obesity. A majority of people are now deemed over fat. So when you look at the world, you're understanding almost 3/4 of the world can be deemed over fat. It's not about body weight. I just had a conversation with a patient that kept referring to this scale, and it's an antiquated move. You really want to look at the composition of your body. If your body weight is average, but you're still over fat, it's a term that we used to use a lot called skinny fat. You want to look at how you're put together. Up to 3/4 of the world is considered over fat, and about only 10% is considered under fat. So 1 in 10 people walking around on the street right now has less than the average amount of fat that we would consider healthy. 1 in 10. Obesity is an inflammatory disorder. One of the most interesting discoveries of the past decade has been the recognition of fat cells, which actually produce cytokines. Obesity, therefore, may be viewed as a low-grade systemic inflammatory disease. Lipotoxicity. It is truly the result of unhealthy lifestyle choices. Lipotoxicity speaks to the idea of atopic fat. Atopic fat is accumulation of fat in various tissues and organs, leading to pathological changes and impaired function. It means that the fat is in an abnormal position or place and displaced. It sort of discusses the idea of visceral fat. This visceral fat in the visceral is over specific organs, your heart, your pancreas, your liver, and can infiltrate those organs, hence leading down a very deleterious road of health. Obesity leads to a lot of postural compensation. Here we have a young man on everybody's left of light body weight and relatively good body fat composition. His posture is pretty statuesque. Whereas you look at his counterpart, as he's gained weight all the way to the right, you see a hyperlordosis in his lower back. You see an anterior pelvic tilt. You see an anterior head carriage. So obesity leads to a postural compensation. Breaks in posture and or movement release more acid than any food you can consume. In addition, with our chiropractic background, with this added weight, it's putting stressors on the joint, leading to the wear and tear, ultimately leading to inflammation in the joint, which will lead to osteoarthritis. So obesity clearly, because of the extra weight, leads to a postural compensation. If you don't think so, take a 20-pound vest, put it over your pelvis, and see the change in your posture. Limiting weight gain could help reduce the risk of up to 13 various cancers. We are now living in the United States of diabetes. That sort of sums up what we discussed in our stats prior to what I had earlier said. This was coined by Dr. Mark Hyman. It's a combination of the prodigious increase of diabetes and obesity together. We can now call this diabetes. And again, it goes back to that 1971 study, or that 1971 findings from the 1965 study, where the US government decreased and suggested the decrease of fat and increase of carbohydrates. With all that being said, you see that unique parallel increase between obesity and diabetes. You have to watch our carbohydrate intake, and more so, not just our intake, but the type of carbohydrates and the relation of our carbohydrate intake to the other macronutrients seated while you eat, which is, of course, fats and proteins. As I had said earlier, 52% of the entire U.S. population in 2012 had either diabetes, 14.3%, or prediabetes, 38%. So at this point, 1 in 3 Americans will develop diabetes in their lifetime. As I had said earlier, 2030, 1 in 2 will have diabetes walking around. It's just a tremendous strain on our healthcare system. The real question is sugar the world's most powerful drug? You can get it anywhere. Sugar eases pain, it's addictive, and has shown signs of causing long-term health problems. It does work with the reward center in the brain, which mimics nicotine, cocaine, heroin, and alcohol. So where are the top sources of sugar in the U.S. diet? Well, number one, sugar-sweetened beverages, sodas, coffees, and specific sports drinks. We also have grain-based sweets, cakes, pies, and the like. That's at about 13.7%. The sodas and the coffees were at 37%. The average cup of coffee has 112 extra calories of sugar if you consume it in one of the more Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks. Fruit juices is number 3. About 9% of our sugar comes from fruit juices. Dairy-based desserts like ice cream or sweetened yogurt, about 6%. And candies like candy bars, jelly beans, and lollipops, almost 6%. I was fortunate enough in January of 2016 to go on CBS and talk about the new dietary guidelines. And essentially, the FDA and the World Health Organization suggested that we should almost totally remove sugar from our diet. Basically, we should cut back drastically. We should limit it to 10% of our daily calories. There are no more limits on cholesterol. And the reason they removed the limits on cholesterol was if you cut sugar down, sugar makes cholesterol. Fat doesn't make cholesterol. I think enough said in that picture. If you want to go to Mickey D's, you get a free diabetes with a purchase of a large Coke. And don't forget the plastic that the Coke comes in will have BPA. High fructose corn syrup has a direct proportion to obesity in the U.S. and a fatty liver. They are rising exponentially in a parallel fashion. So what's interesting, and let's take a second for this, the true answer is not to see these as separate disorders, but as different expressions of the same unhealthy lifestyle, that being Alzheimer's, depression, diabetes, and obesity. And guess what? The two commonalities with all of them is, number one, intake of sugar. Number two, compromise of your gut lining and your gut health. However, they all have exactly the same cure. You know, so many of my patients, again, I can refer to 2 today, we're talking about, well, how many calories are you putting me on? What's my caloric intake? And I tell them I don't count calories, I count chemicals. I don't count calories, I count satiety. I don't count calories, I count nutritional value, food ingredients. The caloric model or restrictive model is a failed model. It fails because of compensatory mechanisms will truly defend against weight loss by actually decreasing energy expenditure and increasing appetite. The flaws and hypotheses have multiple factors, things that should be taken into consideration, and not just calories or dietary composition, the health of your microbiome, toxins, infections, allergen, nutritional status, how well your mitochondrial functions, different hormones and neurotransmitters, and the fact is, how social or how socially are you drinking? Interesting, some causes to insult of what we call extracellular matrix. Extracellular matrix is everything outside your bone. It's your soft tissue, your cartilage, your tendon, your muscle, and your fascia. Your fascia is the saran wrap to your body. It's actually an intracellular signaler to the rest of your body. So causes of insult stem from dehydration, poor nutrition, chronic inflammation, advanced glycated end products, toxicity, and of course, injury. Healthy bones last a lifetime. One of our biggest goals is to keep our bones healthy, especially with the women. There's a lot of osteoporosis within women, and men are starting to show this. One of the bigger reasons why is when chronic inflammation ramps up, our immune response, osteoclastic activity, gets ramped up too. Osteoclasts are the vacuum of the body. Bone is not static, it is dynamic. So osteoblasts lay bone down. Osteoclasts vacuum up the bony debris. When osteoclast activity outweighs osteoblastic activity, you begin to have a loss of bone. And that's very common in women because osteoclastic activity typically goes up when estrogen goes down, which is typically when women start to lose a lot of bone mass at menopause. So inflammation promotes bone loss. There's a tremendous association between back pain and type 2 diabetes. Chronic back pain is truly associated. This just came out in a study with the prevalence of type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, obviously inflammatory, leading to obesity. Weight loss actually will slow down knee osteoarthritis. This just came out the other day. The study emphasized the importance of individualized therapy strategies and lifestyle interventions in order to prevent structural knee joint degeneration as early as possible with people in obesity, overweight patients, all of which are a risk for OA or symptomatic OA. The changes in just the loss of between 5 and 10% of body weight were exponential decreases in osteoarthritis. And that was over a 4-year study, and they studied the articular cartilage and menisci. Inflammation is a key component of myofascial pain syndrome. Inflammation is associated with virtually every chronic disease. Inflammation is called the secret killer, and it was put on the cover of Time magazine back in February of 2004. Everybody says it's expensive to eat healthy. It is not expensive to eat healthy. It's actually cheaper to eat healthy. The standard American diet is $21.50 per day, whereas the Mediterranean diet is about $18 a day. There's a $3.50 difference, and you're eating much more unhealthy. And we're not talking about the bang for the buck later when somebody is healthier eating a good diet. It all starts with what we put in our mouth. It really all starts from what our food ate and what our cells can absorb. Farmageddon. We are living in Farmageddon. In 1985, the U.S. government allowed pharmaceutical companies to advertise. Once they could do commercials, the exponential increase in the use and the prescription of pharmacy and drugs went through the roof. 1997, there was no service done when the government also allowed pharmaceutical companies and infomercials not to list all the side effects. We are less, as Americans in America, less than 5% of the world's population, and we consume 52% of the world's drugs, 80% of the pain opiates, and 7 out of 10 Americans consume at least one prescription drug. So what's the big idea? I gave you the problem, but let's talk about the solution. One of the solutions that I find is laser, or having a laser focus. What does laser mean? Laser is an acronym, light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. It is a focused beam of light that emits photon energy. All photons traveling in the same direction at the same wavelength, we call that coherent, as evidenced by that wave. Same wave, same color, same length throughout. It's a key component to laser effectiveness. How does laser really work? Well, for us, or at least me, the best explanation is the principles of photochemistry. Light having a chemical response in the body. How does it work? Low-level laser therapy stimulates cellular activation process, which in turn can intensify physiological activity. We all know that healing is essentially a cellular process. Therefore, light energy can initiate a cascade of reactions. That cascade goes from the cell membrane into the cytoplasm, into the nucleus, and positively affecting the DNA. I like to call it cellular amplification. Low-level laser therapy, light therapy that doesn't produce heat, allows the body to have oxygenation, neurotransmission, and increases the efficiency of ATP production. The laser is directed at the effective site. Therefore, the photon, which is coming from the light, alters the bidirectional cell permeability. This cellular photochemical reaction actually stimulates the mitochondria to make a more efficient ATP. The resulting effects are rapid cell growth, vascular activity, and decreased inflammation. What are the 3 major components to laser therapy that are critical for beneficial outcome? The number 1 active ingredient when I lecture and when we talk about laser is the wavelength, which is the color, the red light, 635 nanometers, which is the wavelength of natural light. It's really the sweet spot between 630 and 640 for that concept of DNA biomodulation. The dosage. Sometimes we get very confused. We don't need a lot of power. We don't have to put that much power into the body. Our bigger concern versus power truly may be absorption. But with the idea of power, it should be down to milliwatts, not watts. Think of how much power we want to put in the body on an adjustment. Same thing with the light. Just enough to get it into body and let the body do what it needs to over a duration of time. And the mechanism, clearly coherent, non-scattered, which is really specific to laser therapy and not LED therapy. Once again, to back up what I said earlier about the wavelength, the 635 nanometers is the frequency of a healthy cell. It's an absorbable dose, it's visible light, it is truly where DNA replication occurs. So we love to refer to the idea of laser as photobiostimulation, and some of the longer wavelengths just haven't been shown to be quite as effective. In this study, we found out that laser produced a higher deposition of collagen, increasing the tensile strength of a completely severed and surgically repaired rat tendons because laser accelerates tension healing, increasing fibroblastic proliferation and collagen synthesis. It's very good at post-injury inflammation and accelerated soft tissue healing. As I spoke earlier, that 630 to 640 spot, took this right off the internet. There's your photobiostimulation. DNA replication occurs at that wavelength or that wavelength level. People say, well, how does it work? I don't feel it. And I always give this great example. Everybody has seen a baby that was yellow because of bilirubin coming out of the liver. And what have they done over thousands of years? They've taken that child and put it in light. The fact that the light positively affected the child, it showed that the skin and skull were not absolute barriers to light. Sunlight actually passes the skin and influences the blood, neonatal jaundice, as we just discussed. It also has a positive effect on organs. So we've known this for thousands of years. So it's right obvious that light can basically enter our body without our knowledge. In addition, the literature on it is robust. Low-level lasers work by helping the body marshal its own energy and its own cellular resources to heal itself with no known side effects, as long as it's not a hot laser. Interesting that low-level laser has been studied over such a long duration of time. It's really based on scientific literature of more than 3,000 publications and more than 200 clinical trials with positive results. Low-level lasers should really have no heat, because it truly produces or works by producing changes in the cells, mostly by helping sick cells energize and heal themselves. The key component to the lasers are they should be a single color, which we like to refer to as monochromatic, and they should always be coherent. The interesting conversation about the physics of laser. So people will ask me in my office, how do you explain this laser to help with healing? How do you explain this laser to help with body fat? I always refer to it, Einstein created the law of physics, and we apply the physics of laser to the law of physics, and I use the word Einstein, and a lot of patients get a lot calmer. But interesting, Einstein showed that light could be understood as behaving like a particle, a photon. Most atoms do have a nucleus. Electrons that are close to the orbit around the nucleus typically have lower amounts of energy. Electrons positioned further from the nucleus are called high energy, or if you will, they are in an excited state. When an electron falls from a high to a low energy state, that photon is given off. It's called a spontaneous emission of light radiation, or what we perceive as a light bulb. When an outside energy source, a beam of light, like we use with a laser, creates atoms to move from more electrons in a high energy state, from low to high, we call that population inversion. It's truly the first concept to understanding light lasers. The second concept is stimulation. So therefore, light used to raise energy levels. Atoms are bombarded with energy release photons. The release of a photon is called the power of one, hence laser or light amplification by stimulation emission of radiation. Now, the power of one is a very, very interesting term. It's a cellular term. I will give you an example of the power of one. Somebody clearly had too much time to count this. They found there was 18,946 mousetraps that could fit on a football field. Within each mousetrap, there was a ping pong ball. I'm on a sideline. When you normally use a laser, you're shooting 45 billion photons in the area, but you only need one to get in. That one could be exemplified with one ping pong ball. If I were to take one ping pong ball on the sideline of a football field and throw it into that field where there's 18,942 mousetraps holding the ping pong balls were, ultimately they would all cascade. That refers or truly shows you a great example of the power of one. So, how does laser work for fat loss? It's a great question. So here we have a great depiction, and we're trying to show that we have a filled fat cell. The laser light induces a temporary pore. The pore opens, causing the triglycerides and fatty material to seep out. Ultimately, the fat cell shrinks. So what you have is an empty and collapsed adipose cell. So within that, you basically, I like to refer to it, for lack of a better term, as you're popping a fat cell. No damage to the fat cell. You're opening a little hole, and out is coming the triglycerides and the fatty material, and it's just shrinking. So therefore, literally over a duration of time, that person will shrink before your eyes. So here's a great little visual of the effect of photoporosis. On the left, this is the effect of laser light, 635 nanometers has on fat cells. So emulsification of a group of fat cells under laser light. When you look to the right, so thousands of adipose cells are emptied of their fatty debris, and the slimming effect truly occurs. Real science is behind this Zerona laser light. It's truly behind this non-invasive laser light for body slimming. So you have a transitory pore forming. You then have an emulsified fatty debris leaking out of the cell, and ultimately you're going to empty and collapse the adipose cell. So where does the fat go? That's a question that a lot of docs ask me. If it comes out of the fat cell, where does it go? Well, once the fat leaves the cell, it's then absorbed by the lymphatic system, transported via afferent lymph vessels to lymph nodes, broken down safely by our macrophages. It is then transported to the circulatory system, and then one could be used as fuel, which is truly a similar process to the body's natural use of fat as fuel. The body has a natural system in place to transport and degrade triglycerides without inducing the adverse outcomes. Is there efficacy? There's a lot of efficacy. So let's go through the efficacy of the laser light in the published data. Here you're looking at lasers in surgery and medicine, 3 different articles. Here we're looking at plastic and reconstructive surgery, article published. Clinics in plastic surgery, American Journal of Cosmetic Surgery, Aesthetic Surgery Journal, and there's more if you'd like to see. How much fat? How much are we talking about, Dr. Rob? That's what everybody asks me. Well, a low-level loss of 3.5 inches is equivalent to 12,600 calories, which would equate in just pure calories to 61 cheeseburgers, 72 cartons of ice cream, and 2.3 liters of pure fat. Kind of like what you're seeing on that left corner, what fat kind of looks like, that ugly yellow stuff. If you wanted to burn it through exercise, so be it. But to burn it, you would need to swim for 40 straight hours, Michael Phelps. Play tennis for 21 hours, Roger Federer, and jog for 17 hours, not the almost 2 hours that people need to run a marathon now. How does this lymphatic stimulation or system work? Well, the lymphatic system is not a pump-driven system. It actually relies on movement and vibration. When you think of it, the best analogy I've seen is a system is like a flowing river. It kind of shifts debris away from a specific area. So once the fat is released, the lymphatic system is responsible for removing all lipid debris. So what are the common areas of concern? Where you really want to remove fat, reduce inches. Slim that stubborn fat from where? Well, the tummy, the love handles, those are big. Buttocks, thighs, hips, and arms. Those are the 6 areas that most people complain about having a little extra skin, a little extra fat, if you will. 0 pain when you use this kind of laser, 0 surgery, and no downtime. There's no cutting, there's no stitching, there's no pain, there's no damage to fat cells. So let's look at some before and after pictures. These were actual patients that went through anywhere from 6 to 12 treatments. I think you see a very interesting change in the before and after. That's a back view, and that is a vast change in the before and after pictures. Side view of a man, you can really see him losing his softball stomach, beer belly, if you will. And you see this beautiful tightening effect, this tightening of the skin, not just a loss in inches. That's one of the things that we noticed that we haven't documented enough, the tightening and a hardening of the skin, bringing the turgor back. So we see the gentleman on the left before the first treatment and after the 9 treatment. He looks like he's lost 30 pounds. No dietary changes, no exercise changes. The only change was using laser therapy to pop the fat cells open, if you will. These pictures now were done in my office, and I think you can see from the left to right, you're looking at the difference of someone in the before and after. And clearly it looks like the old Charles Atlas comic books I used to look at. There's a female, and you can see the distinctive changes. She lost several dress sizes going through the program. This person's interesting in that they used to do a lot of liposuction, and when she left, she said specifically she had never tried, and she had tried multiple things before, multiple invasive type of techniques. She had never tried and found anything quite as effective as using this laser for body inch loss, or body contour, if you will. So where were the measurement sites? For the males, they were right arm, left arm, waist, flank, and hips. For the women, we expanded it a little bit more. Right arm, left arm, waist, hips, and the thighs. The treatment protocol was very simple. 2 times a week for 4 weeks. The final measurements were taken after the 8th treatment, and then we looked what happened 1 week later. Some interesting outcomes. The lymphatic and nutritional supplementation. Essentially, each person was lasered for 20 minutes on each side, both their front and back, supine and prone. They had a lymphatic drainage movement. We either had them stand on an I-joy. You could stand on any kind of board that moves a little bit. We did some lymphatic work. We also gave specific nutritional supplements that it was able to enhance and maximize the results. There was some fat burning or stimulating the fat process with bile and detoxification. Total was 8 treatments. In 8 treatments, you can see the males, there's their specific ages after the 8th visit and 1 week later. Every male except the last male lost considerable inches 1 week after. The reason they were still losing inches wasn't the diet, which we didn't tweak. It was because the laser has an ongoing systemic effect. So after 8 visits, the average male lost 5.5 inches, and 1 week later, they lost up to about 7 inches. Total inches lost with women, essentially 8.44 inches after the 8th visit, and I can tell you, after the 8th visit, 1 week later, it went up to about 10 inches. Now, I wanted to make a point before I got to the Oliver Wendell Holmes quote. Essentially, the key takeaway here is when you compare and contrast to these other body contours to lose fat, most of which have an attack or removal of fat, removing fat like a lipo or an attack like a cold sculpting or something of that nature. Once you attack, remove, or damage a fat cell, it signals the other fat cells, which signal to the brain. And the brain's hormones are turned on. They tell you to get hungry. Ghrelin is released. And a lot of people say, I took it out, the fat cells, through like a lipo. It came back somewhere else, and now I'm constantly hungry. The damage to the fat cell adversely affects the brain hormone system. So this is non-invasive. This doesn't adversely affect the fat. It just opens a little hole, and out comes the triglycerides. Now, if you have athletes and you want to do this with the body contour and then have them go run and jump rope or whatever it is, go to a CrossFit class, they're going to be very energetic because triglycerides are very energy rich. Oliver Wendell Holmes once said, "A mind that's stretched by a new experience can never go back to its original dimensions." I hope after this webinar, everybody has some stretch marks on the concept of how we can lose fat in a non-invasive manner.
Well, okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Silverman. This has been extremely informative. And I'd like to mention that my own wife has actually tried this kind of laser therapy for the reasons that you're talking about, and she got a satisfactory result from it. Interested to see the research you were talking about. We have some questions from the audience, and if you're ready, I'd like to get to those.
I am more than ready, absolutely.
Okay. One participant would like to know, which supplements do you use?
Oh,
in
that's great.
combination with
Now,
the therapy.
first of all, the company that has a laser is Zirconia, as you can see there. They use something called Curva, which they have, which is great. It's got a whole bunch of nutrients to help with the fat burning process. I use something a little bit more. As you guys know, I have a lot of nutritional background, and I used a detoxification program with it, and I also did something to help with bile emulsification. So I did something a little bit more extensive.
Okay. Another question, and this one's rather interesting. You know how when people diet and sometimes the weight tends to come back quickly. Is there a what can you tell us about a person's tendency to regain lost weight that they've lost through a laser therapy?
Right. A lot of people do gain the weight back because they lost it quick. And what we're finding out in dieting, that if they don't have a lifestyle change over a 12-month period, once again, those hormones in the brain will stimulate a hunger signal. The Biggest Loser really showed us that. And again, a lot of people go on caloric deficits, and that doesn't work because once you go back on the calories, you gain more weight. With this, they don't gain the weight back because they shrunk the fat cell. And really, maybe the biggest addendum to this is the people who do very well, or a lot of my clients, patients who do this, or those who don't want to make the lifestyle and diet changes, they need a little stimulation. They need a little positive effect. They get it from the Zirona, and then they're willing to change their diet. So when you see that, you see a lifelong change.
Interesting, and so much of what you do does depend on patient compliance, and I think seeing the pounds drop off could give people some additional motivation. Well, okay, that brings us to the end of our program. And Dr. Silverman, I understand that you have a special offer for those attending today's webinar?
Absolutely. Konya just emailed me just about an hour ago. And if you'd like to contact anybody there, it's 1-888-242-0571. And within the unit, they're willing to give a 4.9% financing. And with the unit, and this is a key component, they're willing to give a $3,000 marketing package included with the purchase. Now, we all know we can have the best technique, we can have the best device, but if we don't market it well and people don't know it, it may be sitting there and gathering dust. So the marketing program and the money up for the marketing will give you the ideas on how to expose it to your patients, because our goal in chiropractic is always to fix people, change the body from the inside out.
All right. And as we all learned from the presentation today, the obesity and diabetes are only on track to get worse in the population, and doctors of chiropractic are uniquely positioned to make a successful intervention. And I appreciate you showing us an effective strategy for doing that. And at this time, we would like to thank our sponsor, Zirconia, and Dr. Silverman, DC, for today's webinar. And thank you everyone in the audience for attending. Remember, this webinar, including the PowerPoint presentation, has been recorded. And we will alert you when the webinar is available online for viewing. Thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.